Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me today. My name is Jack Boulton, and I'm here to talk to you about my PhD project and application of transition engineering. So I'm originally from Pukekohe, New Zealand. I did an engineering degree at Canterbury, spent a couple of years in the oil industry as a consultant, and have now shifted into a PhD up in Orkney, Scotland, with Susan Crumdyke, looking into the decline of the global oil industry. So just that small little topic. So I'm here today to share my project so far, what it's up to as an application, and I've also got some unique lessons that I think might be interesting from these learnings, the specific upstream application of transition engineering methods. So the first two tools in any transition engineer's basket is the worker problem and in-time method to get started. And a transition lab is essentially applying these two things in a formalized process, like a project in a place with a group of people. So my project is a bespoke application of the transition labs process locked into an oil company's boardroom. So we've gone with a mock upstream oil company, as we haven't got any formal engagement, and we managed to get 4 industry experts to come along with us on the journey and acting as experts and stakeholders. So this diagram here is just showing interactions with the in-time method and how we've been doing a workshop series with them as well to work through these processes, which has been very valuable. And yeah, focusing at company level has been a bit interesting. So when we think about worker problem cycle, getting back to the essential activity instead of being this kind of community value that's popping up, it's the business viability of this theoretical company is what we're keying into. And say this worker problem of that it's working and they cannot change what they're doing because it's very profitable as an IOC, but they know that it's not sustainable. They know it cannot continue on to the future for various reasons. And there's this back and forth of knowing it can't continue, but then not being able to change it, which is clear. Perfect worker problem if you ask me. So one of the main needs that has come out of our project so far, one of the main contributions we've had is this 3 doors framework that came from our in-house design. So this is a sense-making tool for us to get our heads around the future pathways that are available to an IOC. And the intention is to help use this to communicate with people in the industry and talk about what pathways are going ahead. We've got to go ahead and think about strategic design of that. So door number 1, business as usual oil production. It's continuing to optimize what we're doing, but at the end still selling the same product. So this includes things like reducing production emissions, flaring, trying to do production electrification, reducing the scope 1 and 2, addressing those types of things, focusing on cheap oil, all door 1 business as usual. Door number 2, on the other hand, is the switch to a renewable energy provider or to green technologies. It's a side step. So you're focusing on staying in the energy industry as an energy product, but one with a lower carbon emissions. Okay. And that's hugely in the narrative of literature and oil companies at the moment of saying that they're going to eventually be an energy company. We're going to switch to this renewables platform, but still be a big dog in the day. And we saw that a lot more towards the European side. American IOCs have been quite honest about staying in door number 1, but European IOCs have saying, no, we're going to switch. And it was found recently in the last couple of months, sadly, that everyone's pulled back on all ambitions in this area. And it's just said, no, it's not really profitable. They're not seen as viable. They're returning more money to shareholders staying in their lanes. And even when they had been investing in these pathways, we've also seen that it wasn't actually changing the oil production levels and it wasn't becoming their main business model. So that leads to the next step of then, well, what else is out there? What other business pivots are available to an oil company that could be looking into a door number 3, a shift, a pivot into something that's essentially your production goes down and you still remain viable. That's all it is really. How hard could that be, you know? So each door number 3 is probably going to be different for different oil companies. What could be in this realm of actually the production retreat, but still remaining a viable enterprise. It'll probably include a couple of principles of like focusing on a very long-term view, systems thinking, extending past just your product into what value it generates to the economy. And a couple of things we picked out as well is that probably going to involve accepting that your product is going to go down, the sale of it's going to go down, but then you need to invest in actually driving that decline and capturing the value of whatever the new system is to meet needs beyond that. So we've been working through this in our workshops with people from the oil industry, seems to be a pretty receptive, good reception so far, helping to articulate what we're talking about. People are kind of on board with this, looking for this other option, and people seem to be quite aware of the realities of door number one and door number two not working, and that there needs to be something else. Really, so that's been quite cool. So in terms of some nice learning so far, we need a lot more than 10 minutes to get through all the learnings that we've got. So I've decided to focus on some unique aspects about this type of transition lab and applying transition engineering methods to an upstream, which has been quite different to the other transition projects I've been a part of. So I thought that would be quite interesting to share. The first things are, obviously before, at a company level perspective, things change. We were focusing as the actual core aspect. So like the motivations behind it change, because essentially you wanting to become the realities of the world don't change. The emissions still need to go down, but the impacts of climate change are more of an indirect issue to business survivability. So you've got social license to operate, you've got how the realities of climate change and the impending need to reduce emissions are going to affect demand in markets, governance and regulations, other players in the industry, and then how that all affects into the one thing you care about, which is remaining profitable and remaining a viable enterprise. So it's an interesting take on there, thinking about how to communicate these types of concepts. The other thing was that discussing the future becomes very hard with very complex systems. Surprise, who would have thought? So we had a lot of trouble with doing these later steps of the method in our workshop series of getting stuck, going around in circles, talking about the likelihoods of things happening, trying to predict things, or when you're trying to move past a scenario that we ended up just arguing about. Or because if it's a smaller situation, quite often you can easily put some numbers to a scenario and say, is that likely to happen? Is that realistic that's going to happen? And often the case you can say, no, it's not, but let's move on to another one. And some of these scenarios, we're talking about big complex systems across an economy, or where you could fit into that, you can't really do that. So instead of crash testing in our scenario, we used the method of pest analysis, which some of you might have heard of. So how we're using it here is we're picking a scenario, in this case, green tech, green growth scenarios for business, and saying we're assuming that it's going to be viable. Then we're looking at these different components, political, economic, social, and thinking what could erode the validity of this business model. So subsidy volatility, economic space, competition with other things, technology is not working, these types of things, and really getting into the nitty-gritty and working through it in that workshop of these things. And the idea here is to be able to I kind of see it as similar to the wicked problems thing of saying that, well, we're going to put it out on the table, we're going to talk about it, and then we're going to be able to move on. And after doing that, it's principally quite comfortable being able to move on. So it's a good way of getting around it without physically going into a crash test. The next one was talking about the future. So we're going into the future and visualizing our forward operating environment, what that looks like as we're trying to develop a shift project from there. And it can be quite hard to think about what a global energy system look like, or where a business can be sitting within that. So instead of sitting around arguing about what isn't going to be in the future, what isn't, it's not going to be an opportunity, we used a sandbox exercise. So for each sandbox environment, it's a very no commitment way of playing around with these ideas. It's at the end of the day, what's the point of the step? It's to generate innovation, to move past our current trajectories of drawing lines on a graph and try and generate these innovative ideas. So we said, hey, we're in a sandbox, we're going to set our rules at the start. We want need to be profitable, sustainable, create value, have social license. Those are our rules. We're not going to have solutionism or futurism in our sandbox. Those types of things, we're going to set it aside. And we all agree on this, and there can be different rules each time as well. We jump into the sandbox and play around, try and build a world, think about where the opportunity spaces are, these complex things, and then pulling out the learnings. So the rules can be different each time you use them, and you don't have to, you're not trying to get the same future every time, but it's this way of a no commitment way of playing around with this environment. And I found that is quite good for generating innovation around these different projects. And doing it more times is good. So hopefully that might help someone else who's out there trying to apply these methods in different ways, complex ways. So it's about all the time I have. So it's very just a snapshot of what we've been up to at the moment so far. So we're only about halfway through as well. So if there's any other thoughts, questions, opinions people have about the project, especially if people within the oil industry, I'd love to hear from you. Here's my email address, and please feel free to get in touch. And thank you very much for having me.